Part 9 of The Highwayman by H.C. Bailey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. "Fie, what a heat," says McBean placidly. They were now come to Colonel Boyce's lodging, and he bade the bearers take Harry up to his own room. "I sent a brisk lad for Rolfe," says McBean. "I could but stop the blood. He'll be here soon enough. It's but a step to Chancery Lane. He knows more of wounds than any man in the town." Colonel Boyce was for a moment speechless. "I shall send for Dr. Radcliffe and Sir Samuel Garth," says he majestically. "I wish you good night, sir." "I believe they have sense enough to do no harm," said McBean. "And now, Boyce, a word with you. Not in the street." "I don't desire it, sir," which McBean answered by passing in front of him into the house. Colonel Boyce came after, fuming. "Egad, sir, you presume upon my wound," he cried. "You, not I. Patch yourself up, and I'll meet you at your convenience. There's more urgent matter. When the boy comes to himself, if ever he comes to himself, I must have speech of him." Colonel Boyce, who now completely commanded himself, had grown very pale. "You have gone too far, Captain McBean. I desired to forget that I have you in my power. You force me to use it. If you thrust yourself upon me, I shall have you arrested as a traitor." McBean flushed. "Odso, then there is some villainy of yours in the affair. Devil take you, I have a mind to finish you now, a wounded man as you are." He had his hand on his sword. "Will you go, sir?" "Not I. If you ha' murdered him, you—" He slapped his sword home again. "No, mordieu, I can't touch you so. And you may meddle with me if you dare." "Oh, you have a great devotion to the boy," Captain Boyce sneered with pallid lips. "You would have him deeper dipped in your mad treasons? I think you have done him harm enough." He struck his bell. "Harm?" McBean cried. "Is it harm? You that begat him for the heir to your damned infamy? You have soured him with your husk of a soul and your cold cunning. You that made a dirt heap of his life to suit your muddling need. You—" But Colonel Boyce swayed in his seat and fell sideways, fainting. A moment McBean surveyed him as if he thought this too a trick. Then, "Ventrebleu," says he, "here's Providence takes a hand," and he whistled, and it is not to be denied that he looked covetously at the cabinet which held Colonel Boyce's papers. "The poor old devil," he said with a shrug. "He grows old, in fact. I suppose there's more blood in his shirt now than his damned body." And he knelt down and began to feel about the wound. He was at that when a woman announced the surgeon. "Mr. Rolfe? Never more welcome. Here's old Colonel Boyce with a hole in his shoulder, and young Mr. Boyce with 2 holes through and through. A street brawl. Pray go up, sir. The lad's in bad case." "Faith, it's Captain McBean," says Rolfe, a brisk big man, as they shook hands. "What have you to do with Noll Boyce?" "A friend of the family," says McBean. "Away with you to the lad." And he knelt again and ministered to the unconscious Colonel. "A friend of the family, old gentleman," says he with a grin. Chapter 29. Alison kneels. So all this while Alison lacked an answer to her letter. She fretted at the delay. She grew angry soon, but it does not appear that she allowed herself any new pique against Harry. She was angry with circumstance, with herself, and something much more than angry with Mr. Waverton. It was detestable of Geoffrey to dare spy and plot against Harry, intolerable in him to suppose that she would favour the villainy. But she had been a fool and worse to give him any chance of insulting her so. And yet she might have hoped that her letter, sure she had been humble enough in it, that her letter would bring Harry back in a hurry. It was maddening that some trick of circumstance should have kept it from him or him from her, for she had no notion that he would read the letter and toss it aside or delay to come. There was nothing petty about Mr. Harry, no spite, nothing of the woman in him, thank God. What had happened that he gave her no answer? For certain the letter had gone safely to the tavern. She could be sure of her servant. Harry was living at the tavern. The people there gave assurance of that. It was strange that he made no sign. The servant indeed had waited for an answer late into the night and seen nothing of him. Perhaps he had discovered Geoffrey's spies and gone into hiding. It would be like Geoffrey to devise some mighty cunning villainy and so manage it that it was futile. Perhaps Harry really was at some secret politics, captured again by his father and sent off to France, or too deep in some matter of danger to show himself. Perhaps 1,000 things, so that she made no doubt of Harry. He would not deny her when she came seeking him. She had no fear either. Her nature could not imagine perils or disasters. There was too proud a force in her life for her to admit a dread of being defeated. Her man must live and be safe, because she needed him. Harry could not fail her, but she was desperately impatient. She wanted him every instant, and even more she wanted to stand before him and accuse herself, confess herself. For the truth is that Geoffrey Waverton had profoundly affected her. When she found Geoffrey daubing her with patronizing congratulations, when he dared to claim her as ally in mean tricks against her husband, she discovered that she must be miserably in the wrong. Approved by Geoffrey, annexed, used by Geoffrey. Faith, she must have sunk very low before he could dare venture so with her. She received illumination. She saw herself in the wrong first and last, the sole sufficient cause of their catastrophe. A petty, mean creature, snarling and spiteful and passionate for trivialities, just like Geoffrey, just such a creature as she hated most. Pride and honour instantly demanded that she must seek Harry, indict herself, and read her recantation. She needed that, longed for it, and to satisfy herself, not him. It is possible she then began to love. So monsieur must be found instantly. When she thought of all her tale of sins, she must needs think also of Mrs. Weston. Poor Weston had enough against her too. Weston, his mother. It still seemed almost incredible that poor grey Puritan Weston should be mother to Harry. But if she was indeed, she might know something of him. At least it would be good to make peace with her again. It was necessary. And so on the day that Harry fell, Mrs. Alison marched off to the little cottage behind the High Street. It was a room that opened straight from the path, and it seemed very full. Susan was sitting there, who was now Susan Hadley. Her fair placidity admitted no surprise. She smiled and said, "Alison!" Mrs. Weston stood up in a queer frozen fluster. "What do you need, ma'am?" says she. "Oh, Weston, dear, don't take me so," Alison cried, and she edged her way between the little table and the stiff chairs, holding out her hands. Mrs. Weston flushed. "Your servant, ma'am," says she with a curtsy, but she ignored the hands. Then Susan stood up. "I must go, I believe." She smiled and bent to offer one fair cheek to Mrs. Weston. The other was then given to Alison. She smiled upon them both benignly and made for the door. "Susan, you'll dine with me to morrow?" Alison put in. "Oh, Mr. Hadley will be at home. But of course you bring him." "Thank you, then." The door shut behind her, and the room was larger. "I can't tell why you have come," says Mrs. Weston tremulously. "To say I was wrong and I'm sorry. Oh, Weston, dear, to say I have been a peevish, wicked fool." Mrs. Weston sat down again. "Where is Harry?" she said. "I have writ to him to beg him come back to me." "I'm asking you to come back to us." "You? Where is he?" "Ah, you don't know then." "I have not seen him since he left your house." "He has been living in a tavern in the Long Acre." "I have made sure of that, and I wrote to him there. But he has not answered me. He does not answer me. I can't tell if he has gone away." "Where is his father?" Mrs. Weston asked quickly. "His father? Colonel Boyce? Oh, Weston, Colonel Boyce is his father, then?" "Did you come to pry?" Mrs. Weston flushed. "I do not deserve that," Alison said, and then very gently, "Oh, my dear, but I have been cruel enough to you." "It's very well," Mrs. Weston said faintly. "Where is Colonel Boyce?" "I know nothing. Does it matter, Weston dear? He cannot help us to Harry." "I am afraid of him. Oh, it's all wrong, maybe. I am so weak and stupid. But I'm afraid what he may do with Harry." "Indeed, I think Mr. Harry can keep his head even against Colonel Boyce," Alison smiled. "His head?" Mrs. Weston looked puzzled. "I don't mean that, I believe. I am afraid he may win Harry to be like himself. He is so clever and dazzling, and he is full of wickedness. He cares for nothing but his own will and to have power. When I saw him so friendly with Harry, I thought I should have died." "My poor Weston," Alison said gently. "But I am not afraid of that. Mr. Harry won't be dazzled." "You dazzled him." "Oh, and I am full of wickedness too?" Alison laughed. "Dear, forgive me. No, but you are strong and hard as his father was." Alison drew in her breath. "I shall teach you not to call me that, Weston," she said. "And Harry, well, Harry shall find me for him." There was silence for a while, and Alison watched with new emotions the tired, wistful face. "Weston, dear, I want you to come back to me. I want Mr. Harry to find you with me when he comes home." Mrs. Weston cried out. "He does not know who I am," in anxious fear, and clutched at Alison's hand. "No, indeed, but he loves you already, I think." "But I do not want him to know," Mrs. Weston cried. I was not married to Colonel Boyce." "Weston, dear," Alison pressed the hand. "I lived at Kingston. My father reared us strictly. He was harsh. I think that was because my mother died so young. Mr. Boyce, he was a gentleman in the Blues then, and very fine, much gayer than Harry and more handsome. He used to ride out to Hampton Court to an old cousin of his who had a charge at the palace. He met me one day by the river. I don't know why he set himself upon me. I was never much to his taste, I think. But I thought him the most wonderful man in the world. I let him do what he would with me. I don't blame him for that. He never promised me anything. In a while he grew tired. Then Harry came. My father could not forgive me. Afterwards they said that I had killed him. Harry was born. I lay very still, and they believed that I should die. I never knew whether it was my father or my brother sent for Mr. Boyce. My brother boasted afterwards that it was he made him relieve them of the baby. And I did not die, you know. When I began to be well again, my baby was gone. My father lay dying then. He would not see me. My brother was the head of the family, and I could not stay there. I tried to find Mr. Boyce, but he had left the regiment. He had gone to Holland, they said, after the Duke of Monmouth. I could do nothing, and my brother had told me that Mr. Boyce would soon find a way to be rid of my baby. I believed that he had. I never saw Harry again till you know. I never saw his father till that day at Lady Waverton's. He told me afterwards that he had said to him I was dying, and he supposed me dead. I believe that is true. He would not have troubled himself with the child else. "Oh, Weston, dear," Alison murmured, and caressed her. Mrs. Weston pushed back the hair from her wrinkled brow. "Mr. Boyce promised me that Harry need know nothing of me now. I do not know if he has kept his word about that." "There's nothing about Harry that is not safe with me," Alison said. "Oh, my dear, now I know where Harry has his strength from and his gentleness." Mrs. Weston looked at her in a puzzled fashion. "I wonder what he is doing now," she said wearily. "I think I have told you everything, Alison. Oh, your father was very kind to me. When I did not know what to do, I had no money left, they gave me £5. I went to him. He used to come to my father's house, you know, when he had business in Kingston. He used to go all over the country about his trading. My father said he was a godless man, but he was always kind to me. I told him everything. He took me into his house, and indeed I did not know where to go for food. I was your mother's servant while she lived, but I think she doubted me. Your father never told her anything, and but she let me be." "Oh, Weston, Weston," Alison said. "And you have spent all your life caring for me." "There was nothing else to do, but I was glad to do that." She looked at the girl with strange, puzzled, wistful eyes, and saw Alison's eyes full of tears. She put out her hand shyly, awkwardly, and touched Alison's cheek. Alison smiled, laughed with a sob in her voice. "It is a long while since I cried," she said, and put her arms round Mrs. Weston and laid her head on Mrs. Weston's bosom and cried indeed. Mrs. Weston held her close. "Alison, but this isn't like you." "Indeed it is," Alison sobbed. Chapter 30. Emotions by Mr. Waverton. You behold Mr. Waverton exhibiting a high impatience. He was alone in the best room of the Peacock at Islington, a well-looking place after its severe old oak fashion. Disordered food upon the table showed that Mr. Waverton had been trying to eat with little success. Mr. Waverton's hat upon one chair, his whip upon another, and his cloak tumbled inelegantly over a third, proved that he was not himself. Mr. Weston had, for he was born to treat his clothes with respect. Mr. Waverton would be jumping up to look out of the window, flounce down again in his chair to drink wine, and stare with profound meaning at the table, start up and stride to the hearth and glower down at its emptiness, and repeat the motions in a different order. He must be theatrical even without an audience. But he had some excuse for his uneasiness. It was the evening of his conversation with my Lord Sunderland, and that fiasco had stimulated him, you know, to a grand exploit. He was waiting for news of it. The twilight darkened early. Mr. Waverton pushed the window open wider and leaned out only to come in again in a hurry, as if he were afraid of being seen. The room was close, and he wiped his large brow and flung himself down and drank. There was a dull sound of thunder rolling far away. In a little while came the beat of rain, slow, big drops. That was soon over. Then lightning stabbed into the room, and the storm broke. Candles were brought to Mr. Waverton's petulant appeal, and an excited maid-servant bustled and blundered over clearing his table with pious invocations at each thunderclap. She fretted Mr. Waverton, who admonished her and made her worse. Upon him and her there came a man cloaked from heel to eye, streaming rain from every angle. He shook a shower from his hat. "Hell, what a night," says he, breathless. "Save you, squire." "Begone, girl, begone, I say. Odds life, leave us, do you hear?" says Mr. Waverton, in much agitation. "Bring us a noggin of rum, Sucky darling," says the wet gentleman, dragging himself out of his sodden cloak. He flung it upon Mr. Waverton's. "Run, girl," says Mr. Waverton in a terrible voice. "Go, you fool." He advanced upon her, and she stopped gaping and got herself out with a great clatter of crockery. "Od burn and blast it, I want it," says the wet gentleman, and collapsed into a chair. "I believe you, squire, I want it." "What is the news with you?" Mr. Waverton said. "Odds bones, how you got the megs?" "The megs, I say. Oh, rot you, the ready. The 100 guineas." "Is it done then?" Mr. Waverton's voice dropped. "Out with the coal, burn you." Mr. Waverton put a bag of money down on the table. The man snatched at it, tore it open, and began to count. "Is it done, Ned, I say?" Mr. Waverton cried. Ned showed some broken teeth. "I believe you, by God, he has it. He's dead meat. 2 irons through and through his guts." Mr. Waverton flung back in his chair. "How then?" he said in a low voice. "Ned, was it in a fight? You brought him into a fight?" Ned went on counting the guineas, and sometimes tried one in his yellow teeth. "Oh, have done with that," Mr. Waverton cried. "They came straight from my goldsmith, man. Tell me, you said you would force a fight on him. Did he?" "Lay your life," Ned grinned. "There was a fight, sure. Old Ben knows that, by God." Aye, you're fond of fighting, ain't you, squire?" "I fight with gentlemen, sirrah," says Mr. Waverton. "For such base rogues as this fellow, I must provide otherwise." "Provide my breeches," says Ned coarsely, and swept up his money. "Where's that damned rum?" "You may take it in the tap." Mr. Waverton rose. Nay, she'll bring it." "Nay, but Ned, how did he take it?" "Rot you, how would you take an iron in your gizzard?" "He said nothing?" "Now, stap me, do you think we waited for him to say his prayers?" "Prayers," says Mr. Waverton grandly, "they would little avail him." "Well, now, burn me, you're a saint yourself, ain't you?" The rum arrived, and the servant, with frightened eyes upon the bedraggled Ned, went stumbling out of the room again. "You are impertinent, sirrah," says Mr. Waverton. "The fellow well deserved his end. I may tell you that I was advised to deal with him thus privately by a noble lord in high place." "Then it's worth more than 100 megs. You have your pay, I believe. I am satisfied with you." "Damn your airs," says Ned, but something awed by this parade. "Well, I must quit." "It is better," Mr. Waverton agreed. "Oh, there was a letter for my gentleman at his tavern. We pouched that while we were waiting for him. Do you care for it? It's a pretty tender thing. I reckon it's cheap for another 5 pieces." "You are a scoundrel," said Mr. Waverton, and tossed another guinea on the table. "Pot to you," says Ned, but slapped down the letter. "Well, I'll march. Maybe you'll have some more in my way. I won't forget you, squire." And out he went. Mr. Waverton, left alone, fingered the letter contemptuously. His great mind was indeed possessed by thoughts of victory. He had hated Harry rarely, with the chief count in his enmity that Harry was a low fellow, hireling, menial. He could have borne defeat with some grace. He might even have sought no revenge for being made ridiculous if the offender had been of a higher station than his own. But such insolence from a pauper! The fellow must needs be crushed like an insect. Only such ignominious extinction could satisfy Mr. Waverton's dignity. He inclined to despise himself for a shadow of human concern about the manner of Harry's death. Faith, it was an extravagance of chivalry to desire that the rogue should have had a chance to fight, that generous chivalry which had ever been his bane. He felt nothing but exultation at the issue. The wretched creature had been properly punished, stamped out by knaves of his own class in a vulgar street brawl. A dirty hole and a corner end. Egad, my lord was very right. These petty, shabby knaves should be dealt with privately. Mr. Waverton found revenge very sweet. So Mr. Harry Boyce had gone to his account, and Alison was happily delivered. Dear child! Mr. Waverton felt a pleasant warmth of heroism steal over him, felt himself a knight-errant, rescuing his lady from the powers of darkness. Dear Alison! She was free now. To be sure, she need not be told the manner of the deliverance. That would be an outrage on her delicacy. Enough for her that the cunning wretch who had cozened her was dead, and she a happy widow. She had but to show her pretty penitence, and Mr. Waverton proposed to be magnanimous. The prospect much pleased him. He saw himself grandly accepting her, permitting her to be very tender, wittily but with a touch of magnificence, restraining her from too much humility. He came out of his golden dream in the end, and was conscious again of the letter, and sneered at it. A nasty, infected thing, to be sure, damp and filthy from Ned's handling. What was it the fellow said? A tender composition? Bah! Some blowsy paramour of the knave, Boyce. But perhaps it would be well that Alison should know that the fellow had paramours in his own class. She ought to be made to feel how low she had sunk by yielding to him. Mr. Waverton opened the letter and saw Alison's writing. Mr. Boyce, I desire that you would come to me at Highgate. I have to-day heard from Geoffrey Waverton what you must instantly know, and the truth is I cannot be content till I speak with you. But I would not have you come for this my asking. Pray believe it is urgent for us both that we meet, and I do require it of you, not desiring of you what you may have no mind to, but to be honest with you, and lest that should befall which I hope you would not have me bear. Signed, A. Mr. Waverton read with swelling eyes. It was a little while before the meaning came home to him. He was never quick. Then, a sin to which he was not prone, he used oaths. The treacherous, besotted woman! She was still craving for her shabby lover, then. She offered a fair face to her too generous, too faithful Mr. Waverton, only to obtain his confidence and betray him again. Egad, she was too base. Rotten at the very heart of her. Why, some women must lust after a low common fellow, as dogs after dirt. So she would have saved her Boyce from his master's punishment. Mr. Waverton laughed. She would have had him back in her arms again? Mr. Waverton continued to laugh. But faith, she went too far when she tried to trick Mr. Waverton a second time. Much she had gained by her treachery. Her fine husband was out of reach now. It would be a pleasure to advise her of his death. Nay, faith, a duty. The miserable creature had been saved from herself. She must be shown that, oh, delicately, with something of a cold grandeur, a touch of irony maybe, but always in a lofty manner, as became one who moved upon heights far above her grovelling soul. Mr. Waverton, for all his high irony, rode back home through the dregs of the storm very furiously. Chapter 31. Captain McBean takes horse. Captain McBean, healthily red and brown, showed no sign of having been out of bed all night. From cold water and a razor in his own lodgings, he came back at a round pace to St. Martin's Lane. He found his aide, Mr. Mackenzie, taking the air on the doorstep of the Blue House, and rebuked him. "I bade ye bide with the lad, Donald. The surgeon has him in hand, sir. Tiens, he's a brisk fellow, that Rolfe. I'm thinking Mr. Boyce will need him. Is there anything new?" "I would not say so, but he's sore hurt, and I'm thinking he takes it hard." "Aye, you're the devil of a thinker, Donald." Captain McBean grinned. "And the Colonel, has he made a noise?" "He's in the way of calling for liquors, but he's peaceable, the women say. You'll go get your breakfast and be back again, and bring O'Connor with you. I'll hope to need the two of you." Captain McBean relieved guard on the doorstep till the surgeon came down. "I'm obliged to you, Mr. Rolfe. What do you make of him?" "Egad, Captain, you're devoted. Why, the old gentleman has put in for some fever, but I doubt he will do well enough. Be sure of it. What of the young one?" Mr. Rolfe pursed his lip. "Faith, there's no more amiss, but why, he was hard hit, I grant you, but you might take the young one for the old one. Do you follow me? The lad hath no vigour in him." McBean nodded. "I'll be talking to him, by your leave." "Odds life, I would not talk long. I don't like it, Captain, and there's the truth. Go easy with him. I will be here again to day." Captain McBean went up to the room where Harry lay as white as his pillows. A woman was feeding him out of a cup. "You made it damn salt, your broth," says Harry in a feeble disgust. "'Tis what you lack. Look you." Captain McBean sat himself on the bed and took the cup and waved the woman off. "'Tis the natural hale salinity and the sanguineous part, which you lose by a wound, and for lack of it you are thus faint. Therefore we do ever administer great possets of salt to the wounded, and pickle me before I be dead," says Harry. "Be hanged to your jargon." "You'll take another sup, my lad, if I hold your long nose to it, and you may suck your orange after." Harry made a wry face, swallowed a mouthful, and lay back out of breath. After a while, "You were here all night, weren't you?" he said. "I am body physician to the family of Boyce, mon brave. My father has a hole in his shoulder, praise God, and a damned paternal temper. He will do well enough." "How do you come into it?" McBean grinned. "Who were they?" "I am here to talk to you, mon cher." "You will not talk to me, for it is disintegrating to your tissues. Allons, compose yourself and attend. Now I come into it, if you please, out of gratitude. Mr. Boyce, I have it in command from his Majesty to present you with his thanks for very gallant and faithful service." "Oh, the boy got off then?" "King James is returned to France, sir," says McBean with dignity. "Look'ee, tie up your tongue. His Majesty charged me to put this in your hands, and to advise you that he would never have in memory your resource and spirit and your loyalty, which I do with great satisfaction, Mr. Boyce." Harry fingered a pretty toy of a watch circled with diamonds and wrought with a monogram in diamonds and sapphires. "Poor lad," says he. "It's his own piece and was his father's, I believe." "Pardieu, sir, there's many will envy you." Harry's head went back on his pillows. "It's a queer taste." "Mr. Boyce, you may count upon it that when his Majesty is established in power, he will have as bad a memory as the rest of his family." "Bah, what does it matter? You are talking of the millennium." "You will talk, will you?" says McBean. "I'll gag you, mon Dieu, if you answer me back again. Come, sirrah, you know the king better. He's a noble, generous lad. So leave the Whiggish sneers to your father. So much for that. Now, mon ami, you have put me under a great obligation. It was a rare piece of work, and, to be frank, I did not think you had it in you. But I did count upon you as a gentleman of high honour, and pardieu, I count myself very fortunate I applied to you. I speak for my party, Mr. Boyce, when I thank you and promise you any service of mine." Harry mumbled something like, "Damn your eloquence." But McBean was not to be put off. "You will like to know that the King, when he was quit of Marlborough, egad, the old villain hath been a gentleman in this business, made straight for me and was instant that I should concern myself for you. I held it my first duty to get his Majesty out of the country. Between ourselves, I was never in love with his plan of palace trickery and Madame Anne. But the thing was offered us, and we could not show the white feather. Bien, his Majesty took assurance from Marlborough of your safety, so I had no great alarm for you. I could not be aware of your private feuds, but now, mordieu, I make them my own. I promise you it touches me nearly that you should be hacked down, and egad, before my eyes." Harry tried to raise himself and said eagerly, "Who was in it? Who were they?" Captain McBean responded with some more of the salt broth. "Now, I'll confess that I had some doubts of your father. As soon as I were back in London I made haste to find you. I was waiting at that tavern of yours when I heard the scuffle. You were down before I reached you, and there was your father fighting across you most heroical. Faith, I did not know the old gentleman had it in him. He had pinked one, I believe, but he is slow, and they were too many for him. He took it badly in the shoulder as I came, but they were not workmen. I put one out at the first thrust, and the rogues would not stand. I tickled one in the arm as he ran, but missed the sinew in his fat. So it ended. Now I'll confess I did the old gentleman a wrong. I guessed the business might be one of his damned superfine plots. It would be like him to have you finished while he made a brag of fighting for you. But I was wrong. Mordieu, I believe he has a kindness for you, Harry." "What?" says Harry, startled by the name. "Oh, mon ami, you must let me be kindly too. Egad, you command my emotions, sir. No, the old gentleman hath his humanity. He would have died for you, Harry, and faith, he is so rheumatic he nearly did. No, it was not he played this damned game. Who d'ye think it was that I put on his back? That rascal Ben. You remember Ben of the North Road? I put the villain to the question who set him on you. Bien, he was hired to it by that fine fellow Waverton." "Geoffrey!" Harry gasped. "Even so. Now, Harry, what has Master Geoffrey Waverton against you? If he wanted to murder your father, I could understand it. That affair at Pontoise is matter enough for a life or two, though he should take it gentlemanly. But why must he murder you?" "I am not dead yet," said Harry, and his mouth set. Captain McBean laughed. "Not by 50 year," and he contemplated Harry's pale, drawn face with benign approval. "But why does Mr. Waverton want you dead now?" "That's my affair," said Harry. "Enfin," Captain McBean shrugged, with a twist of the lip and a cock of the eye. "Is there more of that broth?" says Harry. Captain McBean administered it. "I go get another cup, Harry." He nodded and went out. His two aides, Mackenzie and O'Connor, were waiting below. "Donald, go up. The same orders. None but Rolfe is to come to him without you stand by. And shorten your damned long face if you can. Patrick, we take horse." CHAPTER 32 Perplexities of Captain McBean. Captain McBean and Mr. O'Connor halted steaming horses before the door of Tetherden. The butler announced that Mr. Waverton had gone out, and then, impressed by the evidence of haste and the martial elegance of McBean, suggested that my lady might receive the gentleman. "How? The animal has a mother?" says Monsieur McBean in French, and shrugged and beckoned the butler closer. "Now, my friend, could you make a guess where I should look for Mr. Waverton?" And money passed. "Sir, Mr. Waverton rides over sometimes to the Hall at Highgate, Mrs. Boyce's house." The butler looked knowing. "Mrs. Boyce? Hey, is that Colonel Boyce's lady?" The butler smiled discreetly. "No, sir, to be sure. Young Boyce. Young Mr. Boyce, sir." Captain McBean wheeled round in such a hurry that the butler was almost overthrown. They clattered off. It was not till they were riding through the wood that McBean spoke. "Patrick, my man, would you say that Harry Boyce is the man to marry wisely and well?" "Faith, I believe he would not be doing anything wisely. That same is his charm." "Tiens, it begins now to be ugly. Why must the boy be married at all? Mon Dieu." "It will be in his nature," says O'Connor, "and likely to a shrew." "If that were all, bah, they shall have no satisfaction in it. But no more will I." There were at the Hall two women who had almost become calm by mingling their distress and their tears. It's believed that they slept in each other's arms, and slept well enough. In the morning another messenger was sent off to the Long Acre Tavern. If he came back with no news, it was agreed they should move into town. They said no more of their fears. Each had some fancy that she was putting on a brave face for the other's sake. There is no doubt that they found the stress easier to bear for consciousness of each other's endurance. So Mr. Hadley and his Susan were received by an atmosphere of gentle peace. Much to Mr. Hadley's surprise, who would complain that venture into Alison's house was much like a post over against the Irish Brigade, for a man never knew how she would break out upon him, but could count upon it that she would be harassing. "We are so glad," says Susan. "She loves to march her prisoner through the town. It's a simple brutish taste." "Oh, I am so, I believe," says Susan, and contemplated Mr. Hadley with placid satisfaction. "She is too honest for you, Mr. Hadley," Alison said. "Oh Lud, yes, ma'am. The mass of her overwhelms me, and it's all plain virtue, a heavy, solemn thing. Look you, Susan, you embarrass madame with your revelations." "It is curious. He is always ill at ease when I am with him." "Because you make me tedious, child." "That's your vanity, Mr. Hadley." Alison tried to keep in tune with them. "Look you, Susan, I am cashiered by marriage. Once I was Charles, now I am without honour." "Mr. Geoffrey Waverton," quoth the butler. Alison's hand went to her breast, and she was white. "Dear Geoffrey," Mr. Hadley murmured. "I do not know when last I saw dear Geoffrey," and he turned a sardonic face to the door. Susan leaned forward. "Alison, dear, if you choose," she began in a whisper. "Sit still," Alison muttered. "Stay, stay." Mr. Waverton came in with measured pomp, stopped short and surveyed the company, and at last made his bow. "Madame, your most obedient. I fear that I come untimely." Alison could not find her voice, so it was Mr. Hadley who answered. "Lord, Geoffrey, dear, you're never out of season. Like mutton." "I give Mrs. Hadley joy," says Geoffrey. Such wit must be rare company. Alison was staring at him. "You have something to say to me? You may speak out. There are no secrets here." "Is it so, faith? Egad, what friendship! But you have always been fortunate. And in fact, I bring you news of more fortune. You are free of your Mr. Boyce, ma'am. You are done with him. He has been picked up dead." He smiled at Alison, white and still and dumb. Mrs. Weston gave a cry and fell back in her chair, and her fingers plucked at her dress. Mr. Hadley strode across and stood very close to Geoffrey. "Take care," says he in a low voice. "Well, tell all your story," Alison said. "They found him lying in the kennel in Long Acre." Geoffrey smiled. "Oh, there was some brawl, it seems. He was set upon by his tavern cronies in a quarrel about a wench he had. A very proper end." "Geoffrey, you are a cur," says Mr. Hadley in his ear. "You are lying," Alison cried. Mr. Waverton laughed and waved his hand. "Oh, ma'am, you are a chameleon. The other day you desired nothing better than monsieur's demise. Now at the news of it you grow venomous. I vow I cannot keep pace with your changes. I must withdraw from your intimacy. 'Tis too exacting for my poor vigour. Madame, your most humble." "Not yet," Alison cried. "Let him go, ma'am," Mr. Hadley broke in sharply. "Go home, sirrah. You'll not wait long before you hear from me." "From which hand?" Geoffrey flicked at the empty sleeve. "Nay, faith, it suits madame well. The left-handed champion." Mr. Hadley turned on his heel. "Pray, ma'am, leave us. This is become my affair." "I have not done with him yet," Alison said. But the door was opened for the servant to say, "Captain Hector McBean, Mr. Patrick O'Connor," and with a clank of spurs and something of a military swagger, the little man and the long man marched in. Captain McBean swept a glance round the room. "So," says he with satisfaction, and made a right guess at Alison. "Mrs. Boyce, I am necessitated to present myself, Captain McBean." "What, more champions?" Geoffrey laughed. "Oh, ma'am, you have too general a charity. My sympathy is in your way." And he made his bow and was going off. "Mordieu, you relieve me marvellously," says McBean, and O'Connor put his back against the door. Mr. Waverton waved O'Connor aside. "You'll be Mr. Waverton?" says O'Connor. "Odds life, sir, stand out of my way." But O'Connor laughed, and McBean tapped the magnificent shoulder. Mr. Waverton swung round. "Hark in your ear," says McBean. "You're a lewd, cowardly scoundrel, Mr. Waverton." Mr. Waverton glared at him, stepped back and turned on Alison. "Pray, ma'am, control your bullies. I desire to leave your house." "Let him be, sir." Alison stood up. "Leave us, if you please. I have to speak with him." "You have not," McBean frowned. "The affair is out of your hands. Come, sir, march. There's a pretty piece of turf beyond the gates. Your friend there may serve you." "Not I, sir," Mr. Hadley put in. "I have myself a meeting to require of Mr. Waverton." "So? I like the air here better and better, pardieu. Well, Mr. Waverton, we'll even walk out alone. Your bluster won't serve you, sirrah. If you be a gentleman, which you make incredible, you may proceed in order, and I'll consider if I may do you the honour to meet you." "Gentleman? Bah, I am Hector McBean, captain in Bouffier's regiment. Come, sir. Now are you warmer?" He struck Mr. Waverton across the eyes. Mr. Waverton, drawing back, turned again upon Alison. "My God, did you bring your bullies here to murder me?" "I did not bid you here," Alison said. "Lâche," says Mr. O'Connor with a shrug. En fait," says McBean, and sat down. Observe, Waverton, I have given you the chance to take a clean death. You have not the courage for it. Tant mieux. You may now hang." Mr. Waverton again made a move for the door, but Mr. O'Connor stood solidly in the way. "Attention, Waverton. You have bungled your business as usual. Your fellow Ned Boon hath been taken and lies in Newgate. He has confessed that he and his gang were hired for this murder by a certain Geoffrey Waverton." "It is a lie. Waverton, I have a whip as well as a sword." "I do not concern myself with you, sir," says Mr. Waverton with dignity. "You are repeating a lesson, I see. But I advise you, I shall not permit myself to be slandered. This fellow Ned Boon, what is his vulgar name? I know nothing of him. If he pretends to any knowledge of me, he lies." "You told me that you had hired men to spy upon Mr. Boyce," Alison said. Mr. Waverton laughed. "Oh, ma'am, I thank you for a flash of honesty. Here's the truth, then. In madam's interest, I had arranged with her that a party of fellows should watch her scurvy husband. She suspected him of various villainies, infidelity, what you will. And, egad, I dare to say she was right. But I have no more concern in it. So you may his back to your employers, Captain Mac what's your name, and advise them that I am not to be bullied. I shall know how to defend myself." Alison came nearer Captain McBean. "Sir, this is a confection of lies. It is true the man told me he was planning a watch on Mr. Boyce, but not of my will. And when I knew, I did instantly give Mr. Boyce warning." "I shall deal with you in good time." McBean frowned. "Dieu de Dieu. I do not excuse you. Attention, Waverton. You lie stupidly. Your bullies, mordieu, blunder in your own style. It would not content them to murder Mr. Boyce. They must have his father too. They could not do their business quietly, nor finish it. The rogue Ben was caught, and the Colonel has only a hole in his shoulder. You may know that he is not the man to forgive you for it. So, Waverton, you have suborned murder and furnished evidence to hang you for it. You must meddle with Colonel Boyce to make sure that his Whiggish party, who hold the government, shall not spare you. You set every Jacobite against you when you struck at Harry. However things go now, there'll be those in power urgent to hang you. Go home and wait till the runners take you off to Newgate. March." Mr. O'Connor opened the door with alacrity. "I am not afraid of you," Waverton cried. "And you, madame, you, the widow, be sure if I am attacked, your loose treachery shall not win you off. What I have done, you know well it was done for you and in commerce with you." Mr. O'Connor took him by the arm. "Don't presume to touch me," he called out, trembling with rage. Mr. O'Connor propelled him out. "I believe Patrick will cut the coat off his back," said McBean pensively, and then laughed a little. He brushed his hand over his face and stood up and marched on Alison. "Now for you," he said. "I beg leave of the company." He made them a bow and waved them out of the room. "Sir, Mr. Boyce?" Mrs. Weston said faintly. "Madame, Mr. Boyce is not dead. He lies wounded. I make no apologies, pardieu. It is imperative to frighten the Waverton out of the country, since he would not stand up to be killed. You, madame," he turned frowning upon Alison, "you must have him no more in your neighbourhood." Alison bent her head. Mr. Hadley came forward. "Captain McBean, you take too much upon yourself." "I'll answer for it at my leisure, sir." "Pray go, Charles," Alison said gently. So they went out, Mrs. Weston upon Susan's arm, and Captain McBean and Alison were left alone, the fierce little lean man stretching every inch of him against her rich beauty. "You do me some wrong, sir," Alison said. "Is it possible?" McBean's chest swelled to the sneer. "Pray, sir, don't scold. It passes me by. Nay, I cannot answer you. I have no defence, I believe. Be sure that you can say nothing to make my hurt worse." "How long shall we go on talking about you, madame?" Alison flushed dark and turned away and muttered something. "What now?" McBean said. In another moment he saw that she was crying. Some satisfaction, perhaps, no pity, softened his stare. She turned, making no pretence to hide her tears. "I beg of you, take me to Mr. Boyce." "I said, madame, Mr. Boyce is not yet dead." The sharp, precise voice spared her nothing. "I do not know whether he will live." Alison gave a choking cry. "I do not know whether he would desire to live." "What do you mean?" A madness of fear, of love perhaps, distorted her face. "You well know. When I rode out this morning I had it in mind to kill the Waverton and conduct you to Mr. Boyce. But I did not guess that Waverton would refuse to be killed like a gentleman, or that I should find you engaged in the rogue's infamy." "But that is his lie." "Ah, you must know that it is a lie. You heard how he turned on me, and his vileness. Bien, you have played fast and loose with him. I allow that. It does not commend you to me, madam." "I'll not bear it," Alison cried wildly. "Oh, sir, you have no right. Mr. Boyce would never endure you should treat me so." "Dieu de Dieu. Would you trade upon Harry's gentleness now?" "Aye, madam, he would not treat you so, mordieu. He would see nothing, know nothing, believe nothing, and let you make a mock of him again. But, if you please, I stand between him and you." "You have no right," Alison muttered. "It is you who have put me there. You, madame, when you played him false with this Waverton." "That is a lie," she cried. "Oh, content you. You are all chastity. I do not doubt it. But you drove Harry away from you. You admitted your Waverton to intimacy. You let him hope, believe. Bah, what does it matter? You were in his secrets. You knew he put bullies upon Harry. Now he has failed, and you are in a fright and want your Harry again. Permit me, madam, not to admire you." "What do you want of me?" Alison said miserably. End of part 9. Part 10 of The Highwayman by H.C. Bailey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. "I cannot tell. I want to know what I am to do with Harry. And you are another wound." Alison shuddered. "For God's sake, take me to him. I will content him." "Yes. For how long?" "Oh, I deserve it all. I cannot answer you. And yet you are wrong. I am not such as you think me. I have never had anything but contempt for Mr. Waverton. If he were not what he is, he must have known that. He came to me after I left Harry. He told me he was having Harry spied upon. The moment he was gone, I wrote to Harry and gave him warning and begged him come back to me. He has never answered me, and oh, am I to speak of Harry and me? If you could, I should not much believe you. From the first, madame, I have believed you. It was I who drove him away from me. I have been miserable for it ever since. I humbled myself." Captain McBean held up his hand. "I still believe you. Pray, order your coach." "Where is he?" "He lies at his father's lodging. Observe, madame, I have said he is not yet dead." Whether he lives rests, I believe to God, upon what you may do to him." "Then he will be well enough," she sobbed as she laughed. "Oh, I believe in your power," says McBean with a twist of a smile. She stayed a moment by the door and flung her arms wide. "What I am, it is all for him." Captain McBean, left alone, took snuff. "A splendid wild cat. And that mouse of a Harry," says he. Chapter 33. Remorse of Colonel Boyce. Captain McBean was strutting to and fro for the benefit of his impatience when Mr. O'Connor returned to him. "Patrick, you look morose. Had he the legs of you?" "He had not," says O'Connor, nursing his hand, "but he had a beautiful nose. Sure, it was harder than you would think. And I have sprained my thumb." "What, did he fight?" "He did not, saving the tongue of him. But I had broke my whip upon him, so I broke his nose to be even. Egad, he was beautiful before and behind. He cannot show this long while, neither behind nor before, faith. What will he do, d'ye think?" "Oh Lud, he'll not face it out. He would dream of hangman. He'll take the waters. He'll go the grand tour. Do you know, Patrick, there's a masterly touch in old Boyce. To choose that oaf for his decoy at Pontoise. Who could guess a danger in him? No wonder Charles Middleton saw no guile. Yet you observe, the creature's full of venom." "He bleeds like a pig," says Mr. O'Connor. "What will we be waiting for, sir?" The lady. "She goes to Harry? Oh, he's the lucky one. What a Venus it is! Aye, aye, she should have married you, Patrick. You would have ridden her." "Ah, now, don't destroy me with envy and desires," says Mr. O'Connor. "But sure there was another, a noble fat girl. Will she be bespoke?" "She belongs to the one-armed hero." "Maybe she could do with another. There's enough of her for two. Oh, come away, sir, before I danger my soul." They heard the wheels of the coach and marched out. Alison was coming downstairs with Mrs. Weston. "What now?" says McBean, glowering. "Do you need a duenna to watch you with your husband?" "Madame is Harry's mother, sir," Alison said. For once Captain McBean was disconcerted. "1,000 pardons," says he, and with much ceremony put Mrs. Weston into the coach. As they rode after it, "You fight too fast, sir," says O'Connor with a grin. "I have remarked it before." Captain McBean was still something out of countenance. "Who would have thought he had a mother here?" he growled. "Oh, faith, you did not suppose the old Colonel brought him forth like Jove plucking Minerva out of his swollen head?" "I did not, Patrick, you loon, but I did not guess his mother would be here with this gorgeous madame wife." "Fie now, is it the Lord God don't advise you of everything? 'Tis an indignity, faith." Captain McBean swore at him in a friendly way, and they jogged on through the Islington lanes. So after a while it happened that Colonel Boyce, raising a hot and angry head at the creature who dared open his bedroom door, found himself looking at Mrs. Weston. "Odds my life, Kate, what a pox do you want here?" says he. "You are hurt. I thought you would want nursing." "I do not want nursing, damme. How did you hear of the business?" "That Scotch captain rode out to tell us." "Od burn the fellow, humph. No, maybe he is no fool neither. Us? Who is us, Kate? Mrs. Alison? She is gone up to Harry now." Colonel Boyce whistled. "Come up and we will show you a thing, eh? This is Scripture, Kate. You used to have your mouth full of Scripture. You put me out of favour with that. Let it be, can't you?" "What, they will make it up then? Does that hurt you?" "Indeed, they would never have quarrelled but for you." "Oh, aye, blame it on me. I am the devil, faith. Come, ma'am, what have I done to the pretty dears? She's a warm piece, and Harry's a milksop, and that's the whole of it. With your tricks you made her think Harry was such as you are, and that wife you married came to Alison and told her that Harry was base-born. Rot the shrew! She must meddle, must she? Egad, she was always a blunder, Madame Rachel. He swore at her fully. Bah, what though? Why should jolly Alison heed her? Alison knows everything now. I told her. Egad, you go beyond me, Kate. You that made me swear none should ever know the boy was yours. You go and blab it out. Damn you for a woman. The woman looked at him strangely. You have done that indeed, she said. No, that's too bad. I vow it is. For once Colonel Boyce was stung. He fell silent and fidgeted, and made a long arm for the herb water by his bed. Mrs. Weston gave it him. "Let be, can't you?" he cried, and drank all the same. Kate, that came over my guard. She has made you suffer, the shrew. Egad, I could whip her through the town for it. Yes, whip her. Oh, what will you have?" Colonel Boyce shifted under a rueful air strange in him. "I am what I am. I have had no luck in women. She was a blunder. And you have paid to say of me what you will. Egad, you have the chance now. Are you in pain? Be hanged to pain. Don't gloat, Kate. That's not like you, at least. Oh, I am sorry, I am sorry. No, nor that neither. Damn. What should I be with you pitying me? Let it be. Come, you want something of me, I suppose. Something for your Harry, hey? What is it?" "I want nothing but that he should live. He has no need of you or me." "Oh Lord, he will live. But you were always full of fears." "Yes, you used to say that long ago." Colonel Boyce winced again. You get in your thrusts, Kate. I swear I did what I could to save him. I could not have borne to come to you else." "Humph. I see no good in your coming. There's little comfort for you or me in seeing each other. I suppose it's your damned duty. I don't know. Oh Lord, then be gone, and let's have done with it all. I want to stay till you are well. Aye, faith, it's comfortable to see you on my back and helpless." Mrs. Weston did not answer for a moment. She was busy with setting his table in order. "I want to have some right somewhere. She is with Harry." "By God, Kate, you're a good soul," Colonel Boyce cried. "I am not. I am jealous of her," Mrs. Weston said with a sob. "Does Harry know of you?" "What does it matter? He'll not care now. Kate, come here, child." No, I am not crying," Mrs. Weston said. Chapter 34. Harry wakes up. Harry lay asleep when Alison came into his room. She made sure of that and sat herself beside him to wait. It was not, a thing which she did well. She looked down at him gravely. Afterwards Harry would accuse her that what first she felt was how little and miserable a man she had taken to herself. He lay there very still, and his breath hardly stirred him. Indeed, the surgery of Mr. Rolfe had bound him up so tightly that he was in armour from waist to neck. After a moment she started and trembled and bent over him and put her cheek close to his lips. She felt his breath and rose again slowly, almost as pale as he. That cheating fear had stabbed cruelly, and still it would not let her be. His face was so thin, so white and utterly tired. The life was drained out of him. She sat beside him, still but for the beat of her bosom, and it seemed that the consciousness in her was falling from a height or galloping against the wind. She seemed to try to stop and could not. She tried to change the fashion of her thought and had no power in that either. It was a strange, half angry, half contemptuous pity that moved in her, and a fever of impatience. He was wicked to be struck down so, rent, impotent. Why must the wretch go plunging out into the world and measure himself against these swashbuckling conspirators? He had no equipment for it. He was fated to end with disaster. Faith, it was a cruel folly to throw himself away and drag up her life by the roots as he fell. She needed him quick and eager, and there he lay a shrunken thing that could use only gentleness, help, a tedious trivial service like a child. He was humiliated, a condition not to be borne in her man. As she watched him, she saw Geoffrey Waverton rise between them, blusterous and menacing, and his lustiness mocked at the still, helpless body. But on that all other feeling was lost in a fever of hate of Mr. Waverton. He was branded with every contemptible sin that she knew. She ached to have him suffer, and, unaware of the contusions and extravasations administered by Mr. O'Connor, tried to console herself by recalling the ignominious condition of Geoffrey in the hands of the truculent gentleman at Highgate. Bah! The coward was dishonoured for ever, at least. He would never dare show his face in town or country. How could he? Mr. Hadley would spit him like a joint. The good Charles. She found some consolation in the memory of Mr. Hadley's sardonic contempt. Nay, but the others, that fire-eating little Scotsman and his lank friend, they were of the same scornful mind about Mr. Waverton. His blusterous bullying went for nothing with them but to call for more disdain. They had no doubt that he cut a miserable figure, that it was he who was humiliated in the affair. And so all men would think indeed. It was only a fool of a woman who could be imposed upon by his brag, only a mean, detestable woman who could suppose Harry defeated. Why, Harry must needs have done nobly to enlist these men on his side. He was nothing to Captain McBean, nothing but what he had done, and yet McBean took up his cause with a perfect devotion, cared for nothing but to punish his enemies and to assure his safety. Faith, the little man would be as glad to thrash her as to overthrow Master Geoffrey. He had come near it, indeed. She smiled a little. The absurd imagination was not unpleasant. Monsieur was welcome to beat her if it would bring Harry any comfort. Aye, it would be very good for her. She would be glad to show Harry the stripes. Nay, but it was Harry who should beat her. Only he never would. And these fantastics were swept away in the wave of tenderness. Mr. Harry was not good at making others suffer. He left it to his wife, poor lad, and she had done it greedily. Well, there was to be an end of that. Pray God he might ever be strong enough to hurt her. She bent over him in this queer mood, and her eyes were dim, and she kissed him and whispered to herself, to him. Yes, she must make him hurt her. She must have pain of him to bear. Harry slept on. She began to caress his pillow and crooned over him like a mother with her child, and found herself blushing, and was still and silent again. Indeed, she was detestable. To make a show of fondling after having driven him to the edge of death. To chatter and flutter about him when he had no more than strength enough for sleep. Why, this was the very way for a light of love. And indeed she was no better, wanting him only for her pleasure, for what he would give, watching greedily till he should be fit to serve her turn again. Yes, that was the only way of love Mrs. Alison understood. It was some satisfaction to scold herself, to make herself believe that she was vile, for she wanted to suffer. She wanted to be humbled. not so much for the comfort of penance, not even for the luxury of sensation which makes self-torture pleasure, but that she might be sure of realizing her sins against the love which was now in command of all her being, and go on to serve it with a clean devotion. One thing only was worth doing. In one thing only could there be honour and joy, to make him welcome her and have delight in her. And so she fell among dreams. She saw something glitter on the table by the bed, and idly put out her hand for it. She found herself looking at the diamonds of the Pretender's watch. How did Harry come to such a gorgeous toy? J.R., the diamonds wrote. Who was J.R.? Alison, Harry said. She started, stared at him, and stood up. His eyes were open, and he frowned a little. Alison, it is you? He said, and rubbed at his eyes. Yes. Why have you come? She fell on her knees by the bed. Oh, Harry, Harry, she murmured, and hid her face. Is it true? I will be true, she sobbed. I want to see you. She showed him her face, pale and wet with tears. After a while, why have you come? He said again. Harry, I knew about Geoffrey. He told me. You knew? I wrote you warning. I begged you, come back to me. Oh, Harry, Harry, you are proud. I had no warning. Proud? Oh, yes, I am proud. What were you with Geoffrey? Harry, oh, Harry. No, it's fair. Well, I tried to trick him for your sake, to save you. I am obliged for your care of me. She cried out, "Ah, God," and hid her face again. Harry lay still and white as death. "Oh, Harry, you torture me," she murmured. "You have the right. No man but you has ever had a thought of me. Harry, I want to pray you. Oh, I want to lie at your feet. Only believe in me. Use me. Take me again." "I am a fool," Harry said, and she looked up and saw that he too was crying. "Oh, curse the wound," he said hoarsely. "Egad, I'm damned feeble, child." I love you," she sobbed, and pressed her face to his. "Oh, Harry, I am wicked." She raised herself. "You are hurt, and I wear you out." "That's a brag," Harry smiled faintly. "It takes more than you can give to kill me, ma'am." "Ah, don't. Stand up and let me look at you." Which she did, and made a parade of her beauty, smiling through tears. "Aye, you're a splendid woman," and his eyes brightened. She made him a curtsy. "It's at your will, sir." "Yes, and why? Why? What made you come back?" "My dear," she held out her arms to him, "I have wanted you ever since I lost you, and now I am nothing unless you want me." "Oh, be easy. There is plenty of you, and I want it all." "Can you say so? Oh, Harry, you have known enough bad that's me. Cruel and greedy and hard and cheating. I have always taken and given nothing back." "Damn your humilities," Harry said. "Oh, sir, but I want them. My new humilities. I have nothing else to cover my nakedness." "You look better without them, ma'am." "Fie, I will stop your mouth." But it was a cup of herb water that she offered him instead of a kiss. "You are a cheat," Harry spluttered. "You presume on my infirmities." "No, no. I have made you talk too much. You must be still and rest again. Burn your maternal care. I have hardly seen you yet a minute." "A minute? Oh." She looked at the jewelled watch. "Aye, sir, an hour. And what's this pretty toy?" Harry laughed. "Why, now I have you. Sure, ma'am, it's a love token." "I shall go away, sir." "Not till you come by the secret. I know you." His ear was pinched. "J.R. Who is J.R., sir?" "Jemima Regina, a queen of beauty, ma'am. She fell in love with my nose and offered me £1,000 for it." "Harry, I am going to say good night." "Hear the truth, Alison. Do you remember, you told me I was born to be a highwayman? My stand and deliver stare, my "Oh, don't play so. I was a fiend when I taunted you so." "Why, child, it's nothing. Come then, J.R. is Jacobus Rex, the poor lad Prince James, who will never be a king. God help him. He gave me that for a memory of some little service I did him. McBean brought the toy to day." Alison nodded. "I will have that story from Captain McBean, sir. You tell stories mighty ill, do you know, Highwayman. Yes, Harry, you are that. You pillage us all. Love, honour, you win it from all. And I am the last to know you." "Bah, you will never be a wife," Harry said. "You have too much imagination. But you make a mighty fine lover, my dear." End of part 10. Recording by James Carson. The Highwayman by H. C. Bailey.